myself. My name is Carter Wade. I'm an executive vice president at Masterworks, and I've been doing fundraising since 1988, 35 years now on the agency side. I've not been on the client side. I've always been on the agency consulting side. I started off with the Russ Reed Company in 1988 for my first couple of years. I worked for Jeff's dad, Bill Cleaver at the time, and Giff Claiborne and the team, and we did a lot of incredible rescue mission work back then. You could do new donor acquisition at way better than break even. You could do it, 3 to 4 return on investment to 1. Those were heydays. So I started out at Russ Reed, then I moved to a company called the Domain Group for 20 years, and then I moved to Masterworks. I was there for 7 years, and then I was recruited away and worked with my 2 business partners at a company called Veritas Group, focusing on mid and major gift management, and I was there for 6 years, and then I returned to Masterworks about almost a year ago. And so what I'm going to talk today about, the reason I ask for your positions and what your roles are is because I'm going to talk somewhat on mid and major donor and what the approach is, how you're making sure you're feeding your mid and major gift program, but I'm going to spend a lot of time on the area of how do you actually manage a caseload. How many of you here carry a caseload of donors that you are responsible to go raise funds from? So we got 1, we got 2, 3. Yeah, I figured it's great. That's good news.
Yes, I guess we're yes, but we're developing. Well, our development office is structured differently.
Okay.
You might say. So.
Okay. Well, we'll jump into this. So here is a classic view of how donors migrate over time, and this will not be new news probably, but we acquire new donors, $25 donor through direct mail or digital or however you're acquiring your donors, and then you start cultivating those donors over time. Those donors then graduate to mid-level, and I'm going to ask a couple of questions about that in a minute about mid and majors, but they move to mid, then they move to major. About 80% of your donors who end up in major gifts started out here. So this idea that, well, we should, number 1, cut these guys out of our direct mail program as soon as they hit this level, which is a huge mistake. You don't take them out of what got them there, and I'll talk more about that. But you have this migration to mid to major, and then you get into plan giving and capital. And I know Money for Ministries here, for example, and you guys focus more up here. At Masterworks, we're focused primarily here on those areas. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So the major message, just to get it out of the way, to make sure you guys heard it loud and clear, is as you have donors migrate up to mid and major, and somebody takes them into their portfolio or under a caseload, what often happens is people decide those donors don't want our junk communications or our junk mail, or they don't want that stuff. Well, they actually do, because the minute we stop sending that, what you believe is not valuable to them, the minute you cut them out, revenue will drop. I've tested this over and over and over. It sounds counterintuitive. It's like, but I have the relationship with the donors. And while you do, it's not nearly as frequent as you need. And so there's ways to supplement that communication. Anyway, the point of this slide is just to show you how the migration happens over time. Pretty straightforward. So a few questions for the group here. So do you guys currently have a mid and major gift program at your ministry right now? And I would say, mid-level might be, and I have that question, mid-level might be, a donor that gives between $1,000 to $4,999 a year, and a major might be $5,000 plus. Do you guys have groups like that right now that you do? Yes. and you're managing?
Yes.
And let me just go to my second. How do you guys define, in your case, your mid and major donors? What's your cutoff, if you will, to how you're deciding to move them from more mass? Thinking about it that way.
We're thinking mid-range is between 1,000 and 500, and then major is anything above 1,000.
Anything above 1,000, okay. Gotcha. Does anybody else have a definition for this?
I would say 5 figures get us into the major.
Okay, so 10,000 and above?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Because different organizations define them differently. That's why I wanted to ask how you guys do it. So we have some clients we work with that set their major gift program at 25,000 plus, and their mids are 5,000 to 19,000. Other ministries are much smaller scale. But the key is you want to start managing donors over time and not lose sight of bringing on somebody to help with your mid and majors. How many donors on average are managed in each of your caseloads? For those of you who have caseloads, and it may be hard to answer, but in your case, how many donors are you responsible for right now in addition to your day job?
I basically concentrate on the larger donors, the ones that are given, you know, the 6 figures
Yeah.
and whatnot. So we do have some of those too. So I concentrate on those, and any new that comes in that's
Okay.
over 10 grand,
Okay.
I'll concentrate on making the first connection with them, especially if they're a new donor.
And is that like 20 to 30 donors? Is it
It's about 50.
About 50, okay. So yours is even a little high for your role,
Right.
because most people in your position would have maybe 15 or 20, and then you'd have other people who would manage the other folks, and then they would get you involved as needed, but they're managing that relationship, so that's what I was curious.
Yeah, we have one other person that's doing the lower end, but we need to hire another person for that.
Perfect.
To help out.
Yep.
So,
Well, it is a very strong return on investment, this whole area, and so if you're thinking like, should we bring in somebody to actually help with this and make sure they're managing these portfolios, the answer is absolutely. It's worth it, for sure. But you gotta have the volume of donors, right? If you don't, they're gonna sit around, because people in your role might have 15 or 20. Most major gift officers, I call them MGOs, or mid-level. Major gift officers typically have no more than 150 donors in their caseload. That should be the maximum. You cannot manage beyond that. You really can't. And that's proven. We proved it over and over and over. The other key is, have you seen double-digit revenue growth from your mid and major gift program over the past 5 years? The answer should be yes, because this is normal growth. You know, 20% growth a year in revenue is not abnormal for a mid-level officer or, excuse me, major gift officer. Mid-level officers is a bit different. I'm going to talk briefly about those because that's really a feeder program to your major gifts. But this should be an absolutely. And if you don't have a program in place, this is a key thing to remember. You can get a very strong return on your investment by embarking on the whole thing. And are you measuring the right value of how donors that you've had in your file have given year over year over year as compared to new money covering up those bad habits? And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. That's an important one. Is your major gift program generating the highest ROI compared to most other areas of fundraising? I'm hoping the answer is yes. Your return on investment should be much stronger than your direct mail program, your digital program, etc. It sounds like a no-brainer, but oftentimes what happens in ministries, especially like post-COVID, I don't know if you guys have experienced, there was the COVID bump in I was going to say 19. In 2020 and 2021, we had a lot of organizations. We have 70 clients we work with, and almost every single one of them had tremendous growth. But then they had the COVID bump, but then things started going back to normal, back to 18 and 19 levels. And some organizations have said, well, maybe what we ought to do is reduce our mid and major gift program because we'll invest that in acquisition and that sort of thing. It's a mistake because you should be generating a very high ROI. If you have a seasoned major gift officer who's been around for 3-4 years, they could have an ROI of 10 or 12 to 1. That's not abnormal. And so major ROI implications there if you haven't got that going. It should be. The other
Can I
thing
ask a question?
go ahead.
So this is a baseline question,
Yes.
kind of dumb, if you will.
No, there's no such thing.
What do you include in the return on investment? What numbers are you looking at? Are you looking at salary?
Yes.
Are you looking at, what are you looking at?
Primarily, you'll take their salary. You can also add in any admin time they're getting help with, if you have an admin person. Those are primarily the two big things. Now, you can add benefits and things like that. I mean, you can measure it different
Gotcha.
ways, but
Gotcha.
it should be what the cost is to the ministry, essentially, by having that person in there.
All right, thank you.
The other thing is, and I talk a lot about this idea, how are we being remarkable? For example, in the case of you working with churches, how are you being so remarkable to the churches right now that they know Sunday Breakfast Mission is the one organization I want to give our time and our resources to because they're very special for whatever reason that is. So one of the things I always talk about, and I'm a big believer, is have you all read the book Purple Cow? Everybody read Purple Cow? This is a guy, Seth Godin, one of the best marketers of our time. wrote this book back in the early 2000s called Purple Cow. And the premise of the book is, he talks about he and his family are driving out to the countryside. They're in London, and they're driving out to the countryside, and there's these beautiful dairy cows along the side of the road. So his kids are in the back, and his wife's next to him, and they're cruising along. And about the first 15 minutes of that trip, they're seeing these beautiful dairy cows. There's a beautiful brown one, kids, look, and there's a black one, that's beautiful, and there's a white one. He says after about 20 minutes, we didn't even recognize there was cows anymore, until I saw one way out in the distance that was purple, and I said, now that's remarkable for now. So the book is, and this is primarily geared to for-profit organizations, like what does Apple do to be remarkable? What does Microsoft do to be remarkable? You get the idea. And some of the great quotes out of this book that I think are great is, one is, the key to success is to find a way to stand out, to be the purple cow in a field of monochrome Holsteins. Second, it tastes like chicken is not a compliment. Another one is the opposite of remarkable is very good. And then the last thing is, in a crowded marketplace, fitting in is failing. In a busy marketplace, not standing out is the same as being invisible. So I challenge, when I work with mid and major gift officers, and I actually manage these people for organizations, what I oftentimes will say to them when we meet one-on-one every week is, okay, tell me how you were remarkable to your donors last week. Tell me what you've been doing. And they have some great stories. They start thinking about being remarkable. They start doing things with their donors that make a huge distinctive and a difference in how they're communicating and how they're relating and making them feel really, really valued. And I'm going to talk about how do you be remarkable in some of those areas as we get into some of the other slides. But this is a client that I work with. Orange County Rescue Mission has been a client of mine since 1992. And I manage 6 people at their agency, or at their ministry. And one time I was in my office working away, and the doorbell rang, and I had no idea there was a package waiting for me. And in the corner it says, from your remarkable team at Orange County Rescue Mission. I opened it up. They had sent me a purple cow. And I was blown away because they remembered that they were trying to be remarkable to me as their coach and mentor, and it was very cool. So I love it because I keep that on my desk. It reminds me that, I keep talking about it. But it's a really key point. I won't belabor it, but think about what you're doing right now with your donors, who everybody around you is trying to get them to donate to their cause. They're just doing it all the time. They're being bombarded every day. It's like in product marketing. What are we doing that's remarkable? One of the things that I have talked about for years and nobody has taken me up on, but this is the idea. How would we be remarkable as a ministry? A money-back guarantee. You give me a gift of $10,000. If you're not 100% satisfied with how we used your gift, I'm going to give it back. That is remarkable. Who's willing to do that? Now, you guys are sitting there going, this guy's nuts. But here's the reality. If you had a donor that gave you $10,000 and they were furious with you and said you did a terrible job, you might actually give that money back, because maybe they're a $150,000, $200,000 donor. You're already guaranteeing their money's going to be used. So why not just go all the way there? Now, if someone does it, please contact me and let me know, because that is going to be remarkable and that's going to stand out. So that's the idea. So another question.
Didn't the cleft palate?
Operation Smile or Smile Train? Which one?
Yes, Operation Smile, I think.
Okay.
They didn't get, I guess it wasn't a guarantee.
Theirs was 100% of your gift goes directly to program. That's it's like Charity Water, who's one of our clients. They talk about 100% of your gift will be used for program, but it's not a guarantee.
It's not a guarantee.
And I'm not a big fan of the 100% goes directly to ministry, because people need support. You have to hire people. So this idea where you're embarrassed to tell donors that you spend 85 or 90%, but we have admin, is okay. You should be doing that. So anyway, that's a small plug for that. So in terms of mid and major donors, the greatest source of income growth for ministries is coming through improved management and accountability and execution of mid and major donor strategies. I'll talk about what that looks like. And what we do is we help ministries create, build, and manage mid and major gift programs to further their mission. That's one of the things we do at Masterworks, in addition to direct mail and digital and radio and all those things, is this area of managing mid and major gift officers to help them be more successful. And again, a lot of this, what I'm going to share, is geared toward those of you here that do have a portfolio in some way, shape, or form, or are responsible for overseeing that team. and how that feeds together. So number one objective, our key objective, we want to find mid and major donors already in your database. So critical. Most organizations I talk with, when I first start working with them, I find out they're all off prospecting. This donor is never given to us, but the board member is convinced they have a lot of money and they'll want to give the Sunday breakfast mission. Now, have they ever given? Well, no, but they have a lot of money. Huge mistake. You've lost your focus. Bring along the donors that brought you to the dance. Don't try to find somebody else to dance with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's really important because when you have major gift officers out prospecting, they're going to lose their focus on actually generating revenue from the donors that they have in their portfolio. So that's really key. The other thing is we want to engage with donors who actually agree to a two-way relationship. We know that only 1 in 3 donors, really 1 in 3, and I've worked with hundreds of organizations on this, actually agree to having a relationship with the major gift officer. Some donors just say, I don't need that. You know what, you don't have to send Joe to talk to me. I love your ministry, I'm going to keep giving. And that's great. It doesn't mean donors aren't going to give to you who are major, it just means they haven't agreed to that two-way relationship. And then we help deepen those relationships through our strategies. One thing, and I know this is really small, I won't spend a lot of time, but I want to make this point. Oftentimes what organizations will do, they have this view one. They're saying, let's just say we define donors who are giving $1,000 cum as a major donor. So our program overall, Carter, when you come talk to us, we generated 2.5 million in year 1, now 3.1, so we've got a variance of 540,000. We're up by 21%. We're doing great, and that's great that they're raising more money. Here's the problem though. What they're not doing is they're not looking at the second view, which is the donors that gave in year 1 that $2.5 million. What if the same exact donors, exact same ones here, give the next year? They gave $1.2 million less. So we call that value attrition. They lost 50% of the value from these donors on a year over year. The reason they're growing, their top or bottom line, is new money, income from donors giving $1,000 for the first time. Look at that, 1.8, that's where they get the 3 million. Happens all the time. Value attrition in most organizations is between 40 to 60%, believe it or not. I had one organization we ran our assessment for, they lost from year 1 to year 2, $106 million from the donors they had been managing year over year, and it's because all this new money kept coming in, and they're like, we don't have a problem. So it's critical to make sure you're measuring your results the right way as well. That's the purpose of that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Make sense? Yeah, okay. A serious problem. New money's covering up, and it happens everywhere. So in terms of our approach, of the way we do this, is our first step is we want to analyze mid and major donor data to find out what are the value attrition rates, what do the trends look like I just showed you, essentially starting with something, it can be basic to that, but you're going to, first of all, we let data drive everything that we do. If we come in and, let's just say we did an analysis for an organization and their value attrition wasn't 40 to 60%, it was only 20%, we're actually going to applaud them because they're doing something really right. Good for you, you're doing it right. But most often that's not the case, and they have that same trend that happens. And then we want to understand caseloads. As I mentioned before, major gift officers shouldn't have more than 150 donors that they're taking care of. Mid-level reps or officers, that number is typically in the 500 to 600 range because theirs is more of a one-to-many approach as opposed to a one-on-one approach. And so we want to understand caseloads. Oftentimes they'll come in and like you have 50, you just said in your role is a lot for you, should have about half that number. Others, when I first went into Orange County Rescue Mission, I worked with one major gift officer. I said, how many donors, Mike, are you managing? He said, 470. And I said, how are you possibly doing that? And he said, what I do is I alphabetize them, and then I just go down the list and I said, Mike, so you're not looking at even the value? He's like, no, I've got them organized by the last name. Big mistake, right? Obviously. But this happens a lot because these folks have no direction, and they kind of left on their own because it's actually a lonely world in this area of managing donors. Oftentimes, these folks don't get a lot of attention. So if they're not being taught on what to do, it's no wonder they're getting lost with that. By the way, I'll make my slides available to you guys if you want to get a copy. I'm happy to give that to you. Second step is what we want to do is we want to establish a 5-year revenue forecast. Again, data-driven. And what we do is we sit down and we talk about where can you be in 5 years, assuming you hired somebody else, assuming you grew the caseloads, we improved value attrition, all those things together. What does 5 years look like? Well, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be way more than double the revenue if you do this right. Because if you're managing it correctly, you're going to have tremendous growth. And so this is something that we put together, and then we all rally around it as a team when we work together. We sit down and we say, here's our goal, guys. Now don't get fearful. We're all in this together, but this is our goal, and here's how we're going to get there. And lo and behold, what often happens, we way exceed this forecast because everybody's rallying together and doing what they have been trained to do in order to get that 5-year plus revenue. The third step is, remember I talked about how 1 in 3 donors wants a relationship, only 1 in 3. We want to confirm a 2-way relationship or not. Now, if you don't get them to agree to that 2-way relationship, just release them. That doesn't mean they're not going to give to you, but you can release them back to the mid-level program as an example. So this idea is learn about the commitment, whether they want a 2-way relationship, determine whether or not they should be on a caseload, and then you create the caseload. In the case where you don't have somebody who's in the mid or major gift role, we help create those caseloads. What makes the most sense?
Question.
Yes.
Yeah, so for my wife, just last week, she's a mid-major. For the rest of you, I was talking before the meeting. She's with Christian Fellowship Ministries. Talked to a donor. She's new, so she's just introducing herself. Had a good conversation. It's like, hey, look, I love you guys. I know what you do. I just don't want to be contacted anymore. So what do I have to do to get you off my list? And she said, okay, thank you, appreciate it. She says, I'll tell you what. So you get me off this list, and I'll give you a gift from my donor advice fund. 2 weeks later, $50,000 from the donor advice. She was laughing because she's like, here's a guy who's like basically like, stop talking to me, and then he sends 50 grand from his DAF.
I could be done with my presentation now. You're exactly right. It happens all the time because we listen to our donors, we let them decide what they want, and then we honor that. And in the case of your wife, the best thing she can do, which maybe she did, is like, you call in a week and a half and say, I just want to let you know we took you out of whatever the communications was. I wanted to check with you. First of all, I want to tell you, and I'm going to send you my contact information. If you get anything else, please immediately contact me. How great would that feel if you were a donor to the cause? That's remarkable because they actually called me. They told me they took care of it, and then later on they asked me if it actually worked. They're not going to be angry if they get a newsletter or an appeal. They're just going to contact and say, you know what, it slipped through. Well, let me tell you, we have a long lead time, so that's not unexpected. You know what, I'm sorry, you're taking care of it, and you actually honor that. It will pay off, like in the gift of a $50,000 gift, because the donor asked us, I don't need to be contacted so much or have that relationship. I'll take care of you guys and I'll give to you, but I don't need that. So we have to embrace making sure donors want a 2-way relationship and not just force them onto a caseload because it feels good they have money to give. I've talked with organizations and major gift officers when we'll go through their list of all the donors in their caseload, and I'll say, tell me about Mr. Smith here. Why does Mr. Smith give you? And they say, I haven't talked to Mr. Smith in 4 years. I've tried for 4 years. I can't get a response. And I say, well, why is Mr. Smith on your caseload? That donor's occupying a spot that could better be used by bringing in another donor. And the light goes out and they're like, you're right. Why would I do that? And it's basic things like that of asking those questions. They shouldn't be on a caseload if they're not going to engage with you. Yes?
It's like they're going fishing in a pond that has no fish.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. You got it. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing is, this is another really important thing. We need to make sure in our caseloads we're identifying donors' passions, desires, and interest areas. So if you meet with a donor who says, I just love to give to your mission because you guys are doing such great work, I just trust you. That's fine for a surface level answer, but you could say, but tell me why you first started giving. And you get into the discussion and you find out that their son-in-law was a drug addict. He got out in the streets, he got saved by a ministry, and now he's back on his feet, and you're like, okay, so now I know your passions, your interests, why you gave to us. I'm going to make sure I keep talking to you about lives that have been changed the same way your son-in-law has been changed. And you actually pay attention to the desires and the interest areas and how you're communicating with them on these. based on what they're interested in, not what you want to force on them. Yes?
All right, so there's a couple of things with this. One, donors don't always know why they started giving, right? They got something in the mail, I don't know, they respond, and they'll say, you know, they haven't thought deeply.
Yeah, that happens.
They just haven't thought.
It happens, yeah.
And the other thing is, they're not, it's not as though people give to us because of our women's program, necessarily,
Mhm.
right? Because really what they hear about is the meals,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah,
it's
that's-
a little bit tricky to get to that,
It is,
real
and it's,
passions.
the point of this is, you want to make sure you're trying to get to know your donors well enough to have that conversation. And to say, you gave to a meal, and this is what we did, and let me tell you some lives changed, and you're gonna probably get out of them why they initially engaged or why they continue to give you. You have to look for clues along those lines. The other thing to discover about your donors are what are their passions, their desires, their interests outside of giving to your ministry. So we find a donor who loves to golf, or a donor who loves to be a beekeeper, or whatever it is. You make sure you understand that about the donor. You keep notes about that donor, so that when you are thinking about how to be remarkable to somebody who loves to golf, well, I went to Pebble Beach